Hello, Kam Buckner.
How are you?
I am well. It is nice to have you here
It's great
for
to be here.
Brit Be Living Conversation.
It's great to be here.
Thank you, thank you. Now, let's get to know you a little bit better. So you are a lifelong Southsider.
That's right.
You are the state rep for the 26th district.
I am.
And now you are running for Chicago mayor.
I am.
So tell me how we got here.
Well, listen, we got here really through a Chicago story. My parents both grew up in this city. My mother was originally from Mississippi. She moved here in 1955, just a couple of weeks after Emmett Till was killed in the town literally next door to where she lived as a young girl. And when Emmett Till was killed, my grandparents said, listen, this is enough. Enough is enough. They had dealt with Jim Crow and the things that were going on in the Jim Crow South in the 40s and 50s. But to see and hear about the mutilation of this little black boy in the town literally 2 miles from where they live was enough to be the straw that broke the camel's back. And so they packed up, they got their 3 little girls, and they came north to Chicago looking for both safety and opportunity. Oddly enough, they moved to Bronzeville initially and moved to the 45th block of Calumet, which is where I live today. Not that I don't live in the same house where they live, but it just kind of all happened. The universe put it together.
Same
that
neighborhood.
way. Yeah. And on the flip side, my father was born and raised here. His parents had come up about 10 years before my mom's parents did, from Mississippi as well, from a town called Canton, right outside of Jackson. And he actually went to grammar school with Emmett Till in Woodlawn, right? And so when I say it's a Chicago story, that is really the center point of much of my kind of family history here. But I'm a Southside kid, born and raised here. I went to Morgan Park High School. And in my time as an adult and career professional, what has been really clear to me is that I'm focused on trying to make change for people who need it the most. And so I've spent some time as an attorney doing work. I spent some time in the nonprofit space. I spent some time as a professor at the University of Chicago. But in 2019, I made a jump to political life. And for the last 2 years, I've chaired the Black Caucus in Springfield, and we've gotten some monumental work done, including the most sweeping criminal justice reform in the history of the state and the history of this country, right? Elimination of cash bail, and really creating real accountability for our law enforcement, but also investing in communities, right? And so as I look around my community, the community that I grew up in, Roseland and Washington Heights, I look at the community that I live in now, Bronzeville, and the communities that I represent in the state legislature. I'm excited about Chicago's future, but I'm really nervous about it as well. I think that we need real leadership who understands this city on a granular level, who understands Chicago's heartbeat, who understands what's important to us and what makes us tick, not just to fix what's going wrong today, but to give us a real passport and a pathway to the future.
Okay. Now let's dive into that a little bit. So you have these very strong Chicago roots, and now you are a hyper-local public servant.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about what's the strength of the communities that you serve. So you're a Southsider, you serve all these very vibrant communities. What makes them so strong?
The people. People ask me all the time, what is the thing about Chicago? What is the thing about your district? What is the thing about your community that makes it better than anywhere else in the world? And people often talk about the architecture and the institutions and the food and the music and the beautiful 26 miles of unencumbered lakefront that we have in this city. But I remind people that there are other places with great food and great music, and we share that same lake with Gary, Indiana, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin. What makes Chicago super dope is our people. We're different, we're strong, we're kind, we're passionate, and we're fighters. We're fighters for the right things, and that's really something that drives me every single day. The district that I currently represent in the state legislature is the most diverse district in the state of Illinois. So I go from South Chicago to the Gold Coast. So I've got South Chicago, South Shore, Greater Grand Crossing, Washington Park, Woodlawn, Hyde Park, Kenwood, Bronzeville, the South Loop, downtown, River North, Streeterville, and the Gold Coast, right? And so when we talk about Chicago being a tale of two cities, right, the haves and the have-nots, many of those stories exist in my district. I have places like Washington Park that have a life expectancy of 59 years old for some people. Then places like Streeterville, where people have a life expectancy of 94 years old, where people are going to die old and wealthy, and other places where we're worried about young people getting past their 18th birthday, right? And so what inspires me is not that I want to stop Streeterville or the Gold Coast or River North from being lucrative, right? But I want Washington Park and South Shore to have an opportunity to be more like that, to have the resources that they need in order to live a quality of life that is on par.
So opportunity for all.
That's right.
And not just the haves,
Everybody.
as opposed in this city. Okay. So as you spoke about, so now you're representing the 26th district, but as you're running for mayor, that means you're representing the entire city of Chicago.
Right.
But we understand that there are many challenges, and those challenges differ from neighborhood to neighborhood. What do you think are some of the most difficult challenges facing the city overall?
I think the biggest thing is crime, right? I think whether you're talking about the far north side or the southwest side, we have an issue right now when it comes to public safety, and we need some real solutions and some real answers to bring us forward. Chicago is no stranger to tough times when it comes to public safety. I grew up in Chicago in the 90s, and it was violent. And we had egregious murder rates year over year as a young man in my coming up days. But it feels different today. It feels indiscriminate. It feels like there is no rhyme or reason. And it's hard to kind of pinpoint and track where it's coming from and why it's happening. And so people are nervous, they're scared, and they want to know that there's a plan for their safety. That's the biggest thing. I think the second thing is just a really, once again, opportunity, right? Economic opportunity, economic vibrance, and viability. Chicago, if it were its own country, it would have the 22nd largest GDP in the world, right? So there are only 21 countries with a bigger GDP, a bigger gross domestic product than the city of Chicago. We've got money. We've got resources. We're not, there's no deficit there, but the deficit has been in our priorities and where we are investing, right? And so when we look at our school system, when we look at our affordable housing stock, when we look at our healthcare system or our sick care system in many cases, we have not put our money where our mouth is. We have not put resources where they belong in order to give people what they need to survive and thrive.
That is fair. That is fair. Now, of course, you wouldn't be the first mayor of Chicago, and we've obviously seen with this current administration the ways they have been working or not working with our various communities. How would you differ if you were to be elected as mayor of Chicago?
There are a few things I'll say. When I'm elected mayor of Chicago, I am going to be the first mayor that we've had in a while that's actually from Chicago. Okay. Number two, I'll be the first mayor who is a Chicago Public School graduate since Harold Washington. I'm a person that's from this community. I live in this community, and I'm not going anywhere. And because I've committed to Chicago and to her people, then I have to do the work that is required of a native son who's gotten every break that I could get in my life because of what this city has done for me and the way that the city has provided for me. When we talk about leadership, way too often we see people who are decision makers and people who are in charge being very far from the people, right? I'm down on the ground. I'm in the gutter. I'm doing the actual work every single day. In 2020, when we saw the uprisings in our communities and we saw a lot of physical damage and harm to places of business in our communities, many of the people who are running for mayor right now, you couldn't find them. I was out there with the people, rebuilding, cleaning up, sweeping up parking lots, picking up glass myself, right? Because once again, this is my community. I'm not a visitor. I'm not flying by night. This is important for me. And not only is it important to me because my parents decide to raise me in this city, but I'm raising my son here, all right? And so there's a even bigger kind of pull for me to make sure that he lives in a city that respects him and that he has every opportunity, whether or not his father is the mayor or the representative or whoever I may be, that him and people like him have the opportunity to live in a city that respects them back.
All right. So a homegrown hero, really trying to give back. Okay. Well, as the daughter of an English professor, I absolutely believe in the power of education for improving our communities. We've seen a lot of struggles with CPS here in this city, and as a product of CPS, What can you say is really needed? How can we help our teachers, the students? What really needs to happen in that department?
Our system has not done enough for our students, for our teachers, for our parents, and we're seeing that in real time. My mother spent 33 years as a CPS teacher, both on the north side and on the south side in Auburn Gresham. My baby sister is a CPS teacher currently in the special education department at a school on the south side. And my older sister is a CPS principal in Austin. Right, this runs through my family, and I'm obviously a CPS graduate. What we've seen with the district is way too often we've forgotten about why we're here in the first place, which is the young people. We've seen fights between the administration and the union. We've seen fights between groups who we all have to remind ourselves that the young people have to be the focus of the work that we do. The young people in CPS are being left behind, and we have to do whatever we can to bring them along. They are not just competing against a kid from New Trier or from Evanston. They're not just competing against a kid from Wisconsin or Indiana. This is a global economy, and they're competing from people from all across this planet, and we have not put them in the most advantageous position to be successful and win. So we've got to, one, put more resources into CPS, two, think outside the box, be bold and creative, and find ways to give our young people culturally competent curriculums that put them in a spot to be nourished and nurtured, but also to succeed in the space, and give them pathways to different opportunities and different experiences that they would not normally have. The school system has a special obligation, I think, to help build up and help raise the next generation of Chicagoans. I think we're missing the mark.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we talked about the need for justice and safety, improved education, but you've spoken a lot about opportunity, economic opportunity, creating that foundation. How would you see fit to actually promote that when you become mayor?
Yeah. So, and I talk a lot about economics because I think that way too often, specifically Black folks and other people of color, have been left out of the conversation on what a robust economy looks like and how we can be a part of it, right? We've talked a lot about social services, which are important and they have their space and their role, but how do we insert Black folks into commerce and give our young people in our neighborhoods a chance to participate in a meaningful way? We are just coming off of the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, and it always bothers me that we talk about this sanitized version of MLK, where it's the Let Freedom Ring and the Washington Mall.
But forget the fight.
And we forget the fight. And we forget the fact that Dr. King, towards the end of his life, really was pushing for reconciliation on an economic standpoint, and it's really what caused his assassination, unfortunately, right? He was fighting powers that were actually okay with letting folks vote. They were okay with letting you sitting at the lunch counter, and even okay with you going to school with their kids. But when we start talking about money and the economy and making sure that we couldn't use poverty as a tool to bludgeon communities, then people said he had to go, right? And so that needs to be the fight that we continue to make sure that we're allowing our young people, our seniors, our upwardly mobile middle-class Black folks the chance to create their own economic destiny. Because our communities, and Chicago is very nuanced because we're a neighborhood city, right? And each neighborhood is different, block by block. But when you're able to stand up neighborhoods, Woodlawn should look the same way that Streeterville does, right? And Bronzeville and Beverly should have much more in common than we don't. For Black folks in the city, when they want to go somewhere within the city limits, but they don't want to hit downtown, we got Hyde Park, right? But why is Hyde Park the only space in this city where we feel welcome, right? This is 2023, and we're playing a very age-old game. We need some new solutions to some old problems, and that's what I've tried to present to the people of Chicago.
So what does a united Chicago under Kam Buckner look like?
Yeah, listen, we can no longer afford to be two cities no more. What we should have learned from the pandemic is that distance does not separate us, but silence does. And way too often in this city, we've lived in our silos and we've not cared about what's going on in the broader city. But now I think some pain and some uncomfortableness has really pushed us to be more collective, be more corporate, and think about how we move the city forward. I think part of the mayor's job is to bring a city together, and I think that hasn't happened with this mayor, and honestly, I don't think it's happened with previous mayors. But what my focus is, and the ethos that I want to convey as the next mayor of Chicago, is that I want to take on the role of a symphony conductor. The symphony conductor does not want the oboe and the celloist to sound the same. He wants them to sound better together, right? I want you to sound more like yourself. I want you to be more like yourself, but I want to bring you together to make music. And that's where we are right now in the city. That's what we need. We need compassionate, tough leadership that's going to be able to bring us together and find a way to getting to yes instead of getting stuck at no.
Yes, I love to hear that. Well, this has been wonderful to hear, again, how much you are really looking to bring the roots of you as a Chicagoan and the wealth and just the great strength of this city together. So I am so glad to hear about that. But let's hear about the man outside of the political office.
Yeah.
So when Kam is not out here advocating for people as state rep, what are you doing?
You know, I've got a big family, love my family. I'm the fourth of 5 children. I'm the only boy. And so I've got a lot of sisters. A lot of people are in charge of me, as you could imagine.
So you're ready for politics already?
Oh, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. And I spent a lot of time with my mother. My wife is a fantastic person. She's a Cuban Ecuadorian, first generation American. We had a 13-month-old son. I have a 14-year-old stepson, and so family is really important to us. And we're an extremely musical family. My father, who spent two and a half decades not far from here at Chicago, at the County Sheriff's Department, also had a career before law enforcement as a soul singer. So in the 60s and 70s, he was signed. Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. So he and my uncles signed a few record deals back in the day and had some local notoriety and a little bit of regional notoriety in the 60s and 70s. But we grew up in a very musical home, right? Instruments galore and music galore. And so I am really spending my off time and my off days trying to give my son that same upbringing, and he's already on point. He loves the music. He's on beat. He's a dancer. That's right. He's a dancer. He's a singer, and anything he sees is a drum, right? And so that is really kind of my off time with family and friends, and most things centered around music and food.
Great. Well, talking about food, so we're actually headed into Chicago Restaurant Week. So you come from a really nice, vibrant part of the city where a lot of great food is, but what's your favorite restaurant?
Wow, so
top 2 or 3.
Top 2 or 3. So I got to give a shout out to my guy Eric at Virtue.
Yes, wonderful
in
restaurant.
Hyde Park.
That cornbread.
They do. Listen, and I spent some time. I lived for 3 years in New Orleans. I've got a lot of family there, and I'm a bit of a snob when it comes to Southern comfort food. I won't even eat Popeyes in Chicago because I think it's different than Popeyes in Louisiana.
That is true.
But Eric hit the nail on the head, and it's a great atmosphere. It's a great experience for folks who haven't tried out Virtue. They got to go check them out.
Absolutely.
And I'll also say, there are some places. Some very small mom and pop hole in the walls that I like to frequent. There's some places on the southeast side of Chicago and some places in Austin that I've spent some time at. But when people are coming from out of town, there are 2 things that I make sure they do. I make sure that they go to Virtue, and then secondly, I make sure that they come to my house because we get it going on over there.
I'm sure.
Between
can I get a plate next time?
We got you.
Okay,
we got you.
Great.
Between my southern and south side roots and my wife's Cuban and Ecuadorian roots, we make some crazy fusion stuff that'll have you calling home to your mother. Yeah.
My mom's from Mississippi, so you know what? She might also feel a way about that.
I love it. I love it.
Well, Kam, this has been wonderful. I'm so glad we got to have this conversation.
Thank you.
I look forward to continue to see you on the campaign trail.
Absolutely.
And continue to see great things for the city of Chicago.
Thank you for all you do.
Thank you.